Welcome back to the Soul Podcasting Podcast, the show where I help entrepreneurs, creators, and thought leaders use podcasting to share their message, grow their audience, and create content with purpose. And I'm Demetria, and I'm so glad you're here. So it's been a little while since I've released an episode, and it's because this summer has been a deeply meaningful season for my family. So I got to celebrate my daughter's high school graduation, which if you've ever watched a child of yours cross that stage, you know it's one of those milestones that just stops time for a minute. And on top of that, I recently celebrated my 49th birthday. So those moments truly mattered to me, and so I made a choice to slow down and actually be present for them instead of rushing past them to get back to the mic. So yes, I've been a little bit quiet, and honestly, I may continue taking a week here or there this summer as I keep embracing this season and as life is changing and things are transitioning for me. But I'm telling you this not as an excuse, but as a reminder that your content doesn't have to be constant to be consistent. So more on that some other time. But let's hop into today's episode because this is the one I know many of you need. And for those of you who are listening for the first time and are thinking about how to get started with podcasting or set everything up so that your listeners want to keep coming back, if you've been thinking about starting that podcast, I want you to be honest with me for just a second. How much time have you spent on the name of your show, the logo, the cover art, the perfect microphone, and the launch date that you keep pushing back because it's not quite time yet? But the truth is that all of that is secondary. None of it matters if you don't have content. And not just any content, but episodes that actually help your audience understand who you are, why they should listen, and what value you want to bring to their lives. So today, I'm not giving you a complicated launch strategy. I'm not handing you a 15-step framework that's going to leave you more overwhelmed than when you started, but I'm going to give you something so much simpler. Your first 3 episodes, episode by episode. So you know exactly what to record before you ever hit publish. So we're going to walk through this together. I'm going to be sort of your coach and guide and friend, really, to help you figure out what those first 3 episodes are. So let's talk about your introduction episode. This is the who I am and why this podcast exists episode. So this is the first one that's kind of like your welcome mat in front of your door. It's like the handshake. It's the moment someone decides whether they're going to stay or scroll past. And here's something I want you to go ahead and release. And it's that your audience is not looking for your entire life story, okay? They don't need your full resume. They're not sitting there waiting for you to recite every single job you've ever had or every credential you've ever earned. But they actually want to know something so much simpler than that. They're asking one quiet question underneath everything. And it's, is this podcast for me? That's it. And that's the only thing running through their minds in those first few moments. So your job in episode 1 is to answer that question clearly and warmly. And that episode should probably include a couple of things, one of which is who you are, and then what you do, and why you started the podcast, who you created it for, and what listeners can expect going forward in your show. So here's a simple template that I think would help you out if you're just getting started, because I know sometimes that blank page is the hardest part. So you can literally just fill these couple of sentences in and will help you to get started. And the first is, I created this podcast because fill in the blank. I've experienced fill in the blank. I know there are people struggling with fill in the blank. And this podcast is here to help you fill in the blank. That's it. Those are 4 sentences. You fill those in, you speak them in your own voice, and you have the bones of your entire introduction episode. Because what's really happening underneath all of it is that your first episode isn't about the information. It's really just about trust and building that trust with your audience. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're just trying to make them feel like they just sat down with someone who gets it, who understands them. And so that is what's going to help your audience to hit the subscribe button. Okay, so now your audience knows who you are in episode 1. They've met you. They've decided you might be worth sticking around for. So then your next job is to show them that you understand them. And that's going to be your problem episode. And that's where so many podcasters freeze up because they think they need to solve everything in one episode. But you don't. You just need to solve one thing very clearly. You want to ask yourself, what does my audience constantly struggle with? And what question do they keep asking me over and over? And if they haven't asked you anything yet because you're just getting started and you don't have an audience yet, think about those things that they might want to ask you. Check resources such as Quora or Reddit and see what people are asking, questions that you may want to ask. And then ask, what mistake do I keep watching people make that I could help them with? So what that might sound like in a podcast episode is some topics that may sound like, why you don't need to wait until everything is perfect to start, or the biggest mistake beginners make with whatever your specific niche is, that kind of thing. So those are very specific topics, and it's being specific that is what makes someone feel like you're speaking directly to them. So that's why it's important to know the kinds of questions that your potential audience is going to be asking you, so you can get very specific when you answer those questions on your podcast. So you want to start with the problem of what your audience wants solved, and then you'll want to know why that problem happens and what they can do about that problem. And that's kind of the whole shape of your show. You name the struggle, you explain why it shows up, and then you hand them kind of a clear next step. And that's if you're choosing to create a podcast that is solving problems. And of course, this is only one type of podcast. So I know if you're creating an entertainment podcast, you're going to have a very different outcome that you're looking for. If you're doing sort of a talk show that's, like I said, like entertainment, you and a friend are, just going back and forth and just having a fun, jovial banter and conversation. It's not necessarily that you're solving a problem, but because I'm talking predominantly to entrepreneurs on this podcast, I know that many creatives and entrepreneurs are looking to add podcasting to your business. And so you're trying to solve a problem in your business. You're trying to help your audience to solve their problems with your products and your services, and you're supporting that through your podcast. So that's why when I speak to entrepreneurs on this show, it's really all about the problem-solving type of podcast. And so that means that the information I share on soul podcasting is going to be very specific to a solopreneur or a business owner. So that said, your goal in your show as a business owner is not to give them everything you know, but it's not to dump your entire expertise into 30 or 40 minutes, but it's to give your audience one win, one moment where they think, okay, I can actually do that. And that feeling is what brings them back for the next episode, which we're going to call that episode number 3. So let's talk about episode 3. And this is where we get really personal. It's more of your story episode. And this is usually my favorite one for people to create because this is where your audience starts to fall in love with you. Information builds respect, and stories build relationships. So in episode 3, your audience wants to know, why do you care about this? Why are you the one sharing this information? What experience actually shaped the way you say things? So when I first started soul podcasting, I didn't follow this exact formula, but it took me some time to really figure out how I wanted to share my content. But looking back on my episodes, and I'm looking in my Captivate right now, which is my podcast hosting. And I'm going to scroll all the way back to episode 1 to take a look at that title. So my episode 1 was called Welcome to Soul Podcasting, Introducing Myself. So I kind of start with my story and why I'm starting the show. And then episode 2, I jump straight into 5 reasons to start a podcast. So immediately I'm already on the idea of, I'm excited about podcasting and I want to get you involved and interested in starting one as well. And then episode 3, mine was about the purpose of your podcast. And so I went on to just create more episodes related to kind of pushing the idea of building out a podcast quickly and succinctly and with ease. So that was kind of my purpose there. So I didn't follow this exact formula, but I think if I were to go back and redo the way I started this show, I would follow this formula, because it wasn't until many, many episodes later that I actually shared more of my story. For example, episode 100 is where I shared like my entire journey of 20 years of podcasting. And I think that might have been a fun thing to do a little bit earlier on in my show, but episode 100 is fine too. And it was a nice celebratory episode, but I think, really sharing more of that personal side of why I started my podcast about podcasting is something that would have helped develop the show even better had I released that episode way earlier, maybe even in episode 4 or 5. Also, episode 3 could be like, again, that story episode where you might include a challenge that you overcame or a lesson that you learned the hard way, maybe a turning point that changed your direction, or even just some type of a behind the scenes moment that shows the human behind the message that you're giving. So I like the idea of the story, the before and after, the before, the struggle, the lesson, how it helps your audience. You kind of set the scene of where you were before, and then you walk through the struggle honestly. You share what it taught you. And then this part is key. You connect it back to your audience. You don't just tell your story for the sake of telling it, but you tell it because it gives your listeners something that they can use. And I need you to hear this, because your story doesn't have to be dramatic to matter. And sometimes we think, is my story enough? Or is it worth my telling, my story, my history, what I've got to share? And yes, I want you to hear that your story does matter. I know we live in a culture that loves the big cinematic rock bottom to redemption story, but honestly, some of the most powerful stories I've ever heard were the quiet ones, the everyday moments, the small little shifts in someone's perspective, right? That ordinary Tuesday that ended up changing how someone saw their whole life. So your story counts exactly as it is. So let's bring this all together. Your first 3 episodes don't have to be perfect. They simply need to create a foundation for the rest of your show, because you're not trying to prove yourself to anyone, but you are creating a place and a space where people can find you and connect with you and learn from you. So start with the basics, which is, who am I? How can I help? Why does my story matter? And that's enough to begin your podcast. It's truly enough. If you even just record those 3 first episodes and just let them sit and marinate, think on those episodes, be proud of what you've done, go back and listen to it while you're editing, and just know that that's your foundation. I think it's going to help you to move forward in the rest of your show. However long that show lasts, you want your podcast to last as long as it needs to, but your first 3 episodes need to kind of build that firm foundation for the rest of your podcast. So if you are in the beginning stages of releasing your show right now, I hope that this episode has helped you and inspired you to get moving on it, and also to know that you don't have to be perfect, but it's a good idea to set a firm foundation for your first few episodes. So before we wrap up today, I wanted to share a quick update with you, because many of you already know that I recently did a soft launch of my podcasting course inside my community, which is specifically for women of faith. And I'm really grateful for that, for everyone who participated and gave me feedback along the way. But right now, I'm making some changes and updates to the course before I officially relaunch it outside of the community. And that soft launch was incredibly helpful because it gave me the chance to refine the content and make sure it truly meets podcasters exactly where they are in their journey and not where I assume they are. So stay tuned, because the relaunch of my course, which is called Launch with Soul, is coming soon. And I can't wait to share it with you. And if this episode helped you out, do me a favor, please share it with someone who's been saying, I want to start a podcast, but hasn't taken the leap yet. Because sometimes, the hardest part, it's not the recording part. It's knowing what to say. It's knowing how to get started and what's the first thing to say. And now you know what to say. Now you know what to do. You have an outline. You have an idea of what your foundational topics will be. And so I'm happy to help you get started and get you moving in that direction. So until next time, my friend, I would love for you to keep sharing your story and keep podcasting with soul. Happy podcasting.